Well, here we are, over 2 years since this footage was initially recorded, and that's right, I said over 2 years. Um, this footage is a little bit old, but I finally decided 2 years after, it's high time I actually make the video that goes along with it. As you can tell by the title, today I'm going to be figuring out, is it possible to beat Pokemon Black 2 without ever using an attacking move? Let's go and find out. For the sake of this run, we're defining an attacking move as any move that deals direct damage to our opponents through the move itself. All moves that do damage after the fact, like Leech Seed, Will-O-Wisp, Toxic, and other ones like those, are completely allowed, while moves like Flamethrower, Thunderbolt, Takedown, we're not going to be allowing ourselves to use, and I've also banned moves like Metronome and Copycat, moves that just basically are an attack on themselves but are classified by the game as status moves. With all that out of the way, it's time to finally start the actual game. We go up to Bianca and talk to her about getting our starter. For our starter, I decided to go with Snivy. Doesn't really do all that much right now, but down the line it gets Leech Seed and a few other moves that could become useful. But for now, as I said, it's not doing anything. Ben, our rival, is out for blood and decides to kick our ass with his Fire Pig. Luckily this fight isn't required to advance through the game, so we can lose it. And now, with that first rival battle out of the way, it's time to make our way over to the second route of the game, where a lot of the Pokemon that we will need for the start of this run are found. Oh. We need to get to the second route. Yeah, that might be a problem. Alright, and right off the bat, we are encountering our first problem of the run. There's a required trainer fight before we're able to get to the second route of the game that houses most of the Pokemon that we're going to need for this early part of the game. So, how do we beat them when the only things at our disposal are our starters, Patrats, and Purloins? Well, we have to get a bit creative. I have to apologize because right off the bat, for this very first trouble battle of the game, we actually are breaking one of our rules, which is saying that we aren't allowed to use multiple of the same mon. That's because we're using 5 Purloins in this battle. The reason we're using Purloin is that at level 3 it learns the move Growl. Growl lowers the opponent's offense by 1 stage, so our strategy here is to lower the Patrat's offense until it's at -6, at which point it uses its only attacking move so many times that it runs out of PP and resorts to using Struggle. Every time Struggle is used by a Pokemon, it does a little bit of damage to itself. This means that eventually, Patrat ends up taking itself out without us actually ever directly attacking it. And immediately after, we have another battle against a Purloin where we use this exact same strategy. These first 2 battles actually took a very long time and are the most grueling battles of the entire run, but they're actually not going to be the hardest battles we encounter. Luckily, after these 2 are done, we have a few mons available to us that are going to be able to help us throughout this run. And with those 2 required battles out of the way, it's time for this run to actually begin. The first Pokemon we're going to be catching on the second route of the game is Sunkern. That's right, Sunkern. The Pokemon with the lowest base stat total of any Pokemon ever. Except for Wishiwashi, which at this point doesn't exist and is in its boosted up form most of the time. The reason Sunkern is so important is that it gets the move Leech Seed at a very low level. It also gets the move Ingrain, which means that we are able to stall out our opponents while slowly sapping away their HP. Sunkern has absolutely abysmal bulk, but it's going to suit our purposes for now. We take on the first gym after grinding up a little bit using that struggle strategy until Sunkern's able to learn Leech Seed. At that point, our strategy for the first gym is simple. We're going to use Growl to lower the opponent's offense and then bring out Sunkern and then Leech Seed them down. This strategy takes a while for matches, but it's the only thing really available to us for now. That means Purloin and Sunkern are carrying the team as of now, but we end up making it through the first gym without that many problems, and if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure I beat this on my first try. The only big thing that's going to be challenging throughout this run is critical hits. The way critical hits work is that when a Pokemon gets a critical hit, they end up ignoring all stat buffs on your side and all stat debuffs on their side. That means that despite having lowered attack, they're going to be doing the same amount of damage as if that attack hadn't been lowered whatsoever, in addition to the actual boosted attack from the critical hit. But we get through the run and get our first badge, and now it's on to the actual hardest battle of this run. And I'm not kidding when I say our hardest battle of this run is against 2 opposing Sunkern. This battle has a few things going for it that make it so challenging, but I'll try and keep it brief. Basically, these Pokemon are both grass types, meaning they can't be affected by Leech Seed, our primary strategy at this point in the run. Additionally, they're special attackers, so using Growl won't affect them whatsoever, and they both have 4 moves, so making them run out of PP is going to take a long time, with no way to heal up ourselves except for our own in green, which only one of our Pokemon has. Additionally, double battles are naturally tough for us. Anytime there's multiple opportunities for the opponent to put on more damage, such as in double or triple battles, it ends up making stall strategies even more difficult, which is why you see in doubles battles competitive, those games wrap up a lot faster than singles battles, where singles battles are a lot more stall based and recovery based and setup based. It's the same principle going on here. Eventually we do end up persevering and they end up struggling themselves down, and now it's on to grinding for the second gym. Before taking on the second gym, I decided to catch a few mons and grind up a little bit. We catch a Coughing because it's able to poison our opponents, and that will become a useful strategy in a little bit, but not for this next gym. That's because this next gym itself is the poison gym. It only uses poison, normal, or other moves that are resisted by steel, so I end up catching a Magnemite because then we can resist all the moves used. Additionally, Magnemite gets a Confuse Beam, but it's not really a reliance strategy. We're more taking it just so it can resist all the attacks being thrown out and we can stall them out while Leech Seed does the rest. Like most battles in this run, it's just a matter of stalling our opponents out. They don't have the offense on their side to take us down, despite the fact that we're pretty underleveled, and that's actually going to be a thing you're going to see throughout the rest of the run. I don't know why I didn't grind up throughout the rest of this run until the very end, but I just didn't. A lot of the battles I took forever on probably could have been completed in only a couple of runs if I had grinded up. Eventually, Leech Seed takes our opponents down and it's onto the first relevant Team Plasma battle of this run. The reason I say this is the first relevant one is because there was one before, but that was just using Leech Seed, whereas this one's going to be introducing stacking effects. The way Pokemon works is that certain status conditions like Poison and Burn can't be applied on the same Pokemon at the same time, whereas things like Leech Seed and Poison can be applied at the same time. That's what we're going to be using this run for the rest of the battles throughout it. We're going to be using Leech Seed mostly to deal damage because it also heals us up at the same time, while also applying things like Poison and Burn to deal damage over time, or in Burn's case, weaken our opponents on the physical side so we can stall them out easier. With that battle out of the way, it's now on to Castilla City in the third gym. But before we're able to take on the third gym, we're informed that Berg is absent at the moment, so we go looking for him. We make our way down to the sewers, and this presents a unique opportunity to grind up and catch a few other Pokemon that could be so useful at different points in the run. The nice thing about grinding in the sewers is that we're working with our rival Ben here. This means that all of the battles are double battles, so Ben can actually do all the offense while we just sit there and really do nothing, and he heals you up after every single battle. This means that we're able to grind and catch a few Pokemon that we're going to need. While in the sewers we catch a Zubat because it's 4-time resistant to the bug type moves that are going to be used at this upcoming gym, but also because it gets a more reliable confusion than the one Magnemite has, and this ends up becoming so useful down the line when I didn't even expect it to. Additionally, we catch a Cottonee because it gets the ability Prankster. Prankster means that any move that's not an attacking move gets a +1 priority bonus, meaning that basically all the moves that we're using throughout this run, like Leech Seed, Toxic, all those other moves, those are moving first in the battle, which is so useful for Pokemon that would normally outspeed us, but we're able to hit them with a Leech Seed first. We also catch a Grimer because it's also able to poison our opponents and is pretty bulky and gets minimized for evasion strategies. With that out of the way, we make our way to the third gym and take on Berg. Berg's gym is a mixed bag. On the one hand, we're not able to do much to his mons except for poison them. That's because 2 of his 3 mons have a secondary grass typing, making them immune to Leech Seed. Well, on the other hand, on his side, he also doesn't have much to deal with us. Our poison types resist basically all the moves that they can throw out, and this just means that it's a matter of poisoning them and stalling. Unfortunately, at this point we don't have Toxic, which increases in damage every turn, so we're just relying on basic poison and accuracy drops and a bit of confusion, but eventually Berg does go down because, again, on offense, there's really nothing he can do against our Pokemon. With that third gym badge out of the way, it's now time to take on Colress. Colress isn't the worst to take on. He only has 2 Pokemon, so we just outnumber him and we're able to use Leech Seed to bring him down. But we can't use Toxic because poison types are immune, so we have to just rely on Leech Seed, and this battle takes a bit longer because of it. But again, because of the numbers advantage that we have, there's not really much Colress can do, and his Pokemon just don't have the offensive stats to take us down. This number advantage will be diminished throughout the rest of the run as teams start to have more and more Pokemon, but for now, we basically can't lose most trainer battles because, again, it's usually a 6v2 or a 6v1. Before taking on Elisa, we catch a Yamask and we also evolve Cottonee into Whimsicott. We evolve Cottonee into Whimsicott just because it gets a few more stats and makes it a little bit bulkier, but we also catch the Yamask because it's able to use Will-O-Wisp. Will-O-Wisp applies the burn status condition to our opponents, and that means that their attacking stat is halved. So, all physical attacks coming out from that Pokemon will deal half the damage they would have otherwise. This is massive. This means that stalling out physical attackers just become that much easier, and for this battle, it helps us so much because the electric type moves don't like going into our grass type Pokemon, and their other moves are going to be halved by the burn status condition. This battle did take me a few more tries than I'm willing to admit. That's just because with these battles taking so many turns to complete, our opponents have so many chances to get critical hits, and those can entirely cripple our strategies of just stalling them out. But we eventually do get through it with Cottonee carrying most of the way. I'll also quickly touch on the Patil you saw there. The reason I grabbed it, it's another pure grass type that gets access to Leech Seed and a few other nice moves down the line. It didn't do much there, but it will help eventually. And now it's on to the next, hear me out, even though I've already said it like 3 times, hardest battle of the run. So, what makes this battle so difficult? It's not the mechanic itself. This battle introduces us to rotation battles. Rotation battles are basically a glorified singles battle where the Pokemon just go in a circle based on what matchup you want to have and predicting which mon they're going to switch in. But it's the one Pokemon Sigilyph that gives us so much trouble. Its ability Magic Guard means that it can't be affected by status conditions and other effects like that. Basically meaning that Leech Seed, Burn, Toxic don't do any damage to it, and we have to find another way of dealing damage. So my solution is Crobat. I end up going back to my Zubat and evolving it all the way up into a Crobat with only like 2 battles, weirdly, even though I don't know how it got that much friendship with me, but irregardless. Basically, the reason we use Crobat here is because Sigilyph's Magic Guard actually does not protect it against self-inflicted confusion damage, meaning that if we're able to take out the other 2 Pokemon partnered with it and bring it down to just Crobat and Sigilyph, and we can hit it with a confusion, we just need to get lucky with it hitting itself in confusion over and over and over, and eventually it will go down. For the interest of saving time, as you've probably noticed, I've skimmed over grinding and a few other things throughout this run because this video is already going to be pretty long already. So we're going to get right into the clay battle. There's no real changes between our team between the battles, and we just swap out the Crobat back for Patil and take on this battle. The ground types have absolutely nothing they can do against us. They're not immune to Toxic or Burn. They're not immune to Leech Seed. They actually don't like taking on our grass types, and they're all physical attackers, so Burn cripples them. This means that this battle is probably the easiest gym battle that we're facing throughout the entire run, which is kind of a shame because I actually really like Clay and he is pretty dripped out. Unfortunately, drip can only get you so far, and this battle goes by without a sitch, and I actually ended up beating it in only my first try, which I think was the only gym that I beat first try throughout the whole run. After that, Patil evolves into Lilligant, and it just gets a few better stats, and again, it's just going to be used for leech cheating and other stuff like that. Then we take on the Pokemon World Tournament. I'm going to skip over these entire battles. Absolutely nothing relevant happens. We ended up winning in our first try. All the Pokemon we had to face were so easy to beat. It was just boring when I was going through the footage. Now it's time for the Flying Gym. We make a few moves beforehand. We grab an Emolga that we trade away for a Gigalith, and we picked up a Litwick. I'll go over the Gigalith first. Gigalith is a rock type, so it's resistant to most of the flying type moves that are being thrown out from this gym, and it gets the move Stealth Rocks. The way Stealth Rocks works is that when a Pokemon switches into battle, it takes damage based on how weak they are to rock type moves. Flying types are weak to rock type moves, so Stealth Rocks does a nice chunk of damage right off the bat. We also grabbed a Litwick. Litwick's pretty useful. It has the ability Flame Body, meaning that a Pokemon can be burned just by attacking it, but it also gets the move Will-O-Wisp, and it has immunities to normal and fighting moves, meaning that's going to be super useful for switching in and stalling out Pokemon that we know are going to be going for a normal or a fighting move later down the line. I actually lied before when I said that Clay was the easiest gym leader in this run. It was easily this gym. I don't know why. You would think the flying types would give us more challenge when most of our strategy is relying on grass types, but it actually wasn't all that difficult. I remember going through the gym, beating all the trainers, and then not wanting to grind up, so I decided, hey, what if I just try taking on the gym for shits and giggles and see how badly I get defeated, so I know how much I have to grind up, and then I ended up beating it first try very, very easily. So I guess that's a good thing. I don't know why it was this easy. It probably shouldn't have been, but hopefully it bodes well for the rest of the run. Eventually, all of our Pokemon fall to the normal Leech Seeds and Burns, and with that, we secure the 6th gym badge. After that, we evolve Yonmask into Cofagrigus, and we also evolve Litwick all the way up into Chandelure. With those two evolved up, we now have so much more bulk on our side of the field, which is perfect because now there's a rival battle against Ben. I skipped over a few of the other battles against Ben throughout this run, but I wanted to cover this one because this one gave me the most challenge. It still wasn't all that difficult, but it did take a few tries just because we're getting to a point in the game where the trainers have more and more Pokemon, meaning that battles are taking longer and longer. So with Ben, he has many more chances to get critical hits, so those critical hits did end up being our downfall a few of the times I attempted this battle. But eventually, even Ben is susceptible to our same strategies. I also want to cover Serperior, which you now see is back in the party. I brought it back because it also gets Leech Seed, which now means that we have 3 Leech Seeders on the team, but it also gets access to Coil, meaning it can buff up its defense, and it gets Light Screen and Reflect, making the whole team bulkier. It's so useful, and it actually ended up making a surprising comeback after being useless earlier, and ironically is probably the key to winning this battle after getting destroyed by Ben earlier in the run, so it had that nice little redemption arc, and becomes a staple of our team for the rest of the run. We end up defeating Ben, and Ben throws a hissy fit, complains about some dude stealing his sister's cat or something, I don't really know, and we go and invade an old lady's house and she tells us a ghost story. Ironically, the scientists in the room get pretty scared about it, but I'm a big macho man, so I don't really care. And then after she's done telling us the ghost story, we have our first ever battle against Zinzalin. You're not going to see it from this battle, but Zinzalin becomes a little bit of an issue down the line. In this battle, it's a double battle with Ben, so Ben's able to deal most of the damage while we kind of just sit there again and do nothing. Thank you, Ben. But down the line, Zinzalin is going to be an issue, as well as most of the other Team Plasma grunts. The reason is that so many of their Pokemon match up so well into our Mons. They carry mostly Ice, Poison, and Dark types, meaning that most teams will have a way to hit our Pokemon 4 super effective, but we get through that one without a sitch. And now it's on to Drayden, the 7th gym leader. Drayden and his dragon types don't have much they can deal with to us specifically, and this battle went by very easily, so I guess now would just be a good time to go over the strategies you're going to be seeing for the rest of this run, so I don't have to interrupt the rest of the video. As you already saw, we're using Leech Seed and Toxic for most of these battles, and that's our way of getting through a lot of them, but we also have a few other strategies. Chandelure and Muck both get minimized, and Muck itself gets acid armor, meaning that we're able to buff up our evasion so that most moves don't end up hitting us, and if they do and it's Muck and it's a physical move, it's going to be dealing basically no damage, and it's so little damage that we're able to recover and make it through the battle with almost full health most of the time. That strategy is pretty cheesy, but it ends up carrying us down the line. I'll also use this time to go over Lilligant because I haven't really talked about it. Lilligant's more of a supportive mon. It gets Leech Seed, but most of its moves are used for kind of cleaning up little problems that we encounter throughout the battle. It gets Sleep Powder, which is actually the best status condition just because it means that our opponents can't act at all during it, but it is a bit luck dependent, so Toxic is usually more reliable. But it also gets Aromatherapy, meaning that we can heal up our own status conditions, and Synthesis to heal itself. So it actually ends up becoming pretty bulky. We walk outside, see Team Plasma commit minor acts of terror, and then we have a solo battle against Zinzalin. This is where Zinzalin shows his strength and the strength of all of Team Plasma. Their Ice and Poison types are able to hit our Grass type Mons, and their Dark types are able to hit our Ghost type Mons. But most of their Mons are only physical attackers, so we have Will-O-Wisp, Acid Armor, and other things at our disposal to make sure that physical attackers aren't all that bad. The nice thing about Team Plasma battles, and the reason I'm not going to cover them, is despite being able to hit us for super effective, usually because there's so many at such a short time, there's only like 1 or 2 per battle, so we actually are able to just outnumber them. This battle goes by pretty easily. It did take me a couple tries because of the aforementioned typing challenges and a few lucky critical hits, which I can't stress enough are just so difficult to get through for this run. But eventually Zinzalin goes down, and now it's finally on to the 8th and final gym badge, the Water Gym. The only difficult thing in this battle is the self-inflicted wounds of being lazy and not grinding up. As you can see, I'm 5 levels below where I should be, and it's only going to get worse on Victory Road, but I promise I will fix it down the line. Don't be that mad at me. This battle goes by basically the same way, and it's pretty easily despite being so underleveled, so I guess I'll just go over the rest of the strategies that you're going to be seeing for the rest of this run. With this battle being so easy, I guess now would be a good time to continue going over the strategies I went over in the last gym, but doing the rest of the Pokemon that I didn't get to cover there. The next Pokemon I'm going to cover is Chandelure. Chandelure's moveset is at this point Will-O-Wisp, Memento, Confuse Ray, and Minimize. I already went over Minimize and Will-O-Wisp, so you know what it does. The way Memento works is that Memento means that when a Pokemon uses it, it kills itself, but it ends up giving a -2 special attack and attack to the opponent it's used on. So if we're going down, might as well go out on our own terms and cripple them. And the way Confuse Ray works is that it applies Confusion, which is useful for Pokemon that are immune to some of the other stats conditions we have. Next I'll go over Cofagrigus. Cofagrigus gets Flash, mostly for getting through caves, but it can also be used to lower the accuracy of opponents, but its big move I want to cover that's not seen in the rest of the team is Curse. The way Curse works is that when used by a ghost type, it cuts the user's HP in half, but deals 1/4 of the victim's HP every turn. Basically saying that you're going to be dealing immediate damage now that you're likely going to be healing off with Leech Seeds, while as the other opponents can be dealing massive damage every single turn done to them. After that battle is done, it's now on to the Plasma Frigate. And I'm going to skip through basically all these battles because despite the bad type matchups, they were super easy, and right on to the next Zinzlin matchup, which is again a double battle, so Ben carries us through it once again. I'm very lucky that most of the double battles in this game are with partners and not on your own, because double battles are so difficult for us, and there's a reason that singles battles last usually 40 turns, whereas double battles are usually done in like 10 in competitive Pokemon. After that battle being super easy, we're in for quite a shock when we get to Colress, who's, well, I'll put this bluntly. Colress kind of kicks our ass. This battle took the second most attempts of any single battle in this run, and I still don't know why. Looking at his team, there should be nothing here that really does all that much to me. I don't know why it took this many tries. Maybe it was just that he has so many Pokemon and I got unlucky with crits. I genuinely don't remember, but this battle should not have been this difficult, but Colress kept kicking our ass over and over. His steel types aren't immune to anything except for our Toxic, and Leech Seed and Burn should still cripple him, so I don't know what happened, but we finally got one run where we got lucky, ended up taking him down and winning this battle despite it taking so many tries. And with that battle out of the way, it's now on to the climax of the video game. We've caught up to Ghetsis, who now shows us Kyurem and tries to assassinate a 10-year-old before Zekrom steps in to save our butts. I'm going to go over this part of the game just because the cutscene in the background is so cool, but also because I just want to talk about how amazing these games are, specifically Black 2 and White 2. Black and White, I don't actually hold in all that high regard despite them being my first Pokemon games, and a lot of other people seem to think they're the best in the series, but I have to say that Black 2 and White 2 just eclipse them in every single regard. Kyurem being added to that trio is so amazing, and the Black Kyurem and White Kyurem fusions are such an awesome mechanic that I think need to come back. And also just their design is so cool as being this big hulking beast that you can tell is incomplete and monstrous, and I really hope we get to a point where we get like a Gen 5 Legends game like Legends Arceus, but it's set in past Unova and we get to see the complete dragon. This game's dichotomy between truth and ideals and how it creates like a monster when you only have one or the other is so cool, and Kyurem itself is so cool just being a cold husk of a Pokemon. That's why it's an ice type, because it doesn't have like anything, it's empty, it's cold inside because it's just been abandoned by the other two dragons that got separated. And I'm rambling a bit here, but I just love this part of the game so much, and I love these designs, and to this day Kyurem Black is still one of my favorite legendaries, if not maybe my favorite. I mean, just looking at it here is just so awesome. But I guess with that out of the way, sorry for the little tirade there. It's now time to kick this thing's ass, and luckily for us, this battle goes by pretty easily. It is a 6v1. This monster is supposed to be pretty difficult, but it can't really do all that much again in a 6v1. Despite being 10 levels higher than we are, we can just set up Leech Seed with Whimsicott as soon as we come out, and after that, there's not really much it can do. Just stall it out with Reflects and Light Screens, and coil up with Serperior, and at that point, it just needs to deal basically one-shot kills the rest of our mons, which is just impossible despite the level difference, so it does go down pretty easily. a bit anticlimactic for what's supposed to be the big main fight of the game, but I'm not complaining. And now, here we are, against Ghetsis. Going into this fight, I was so worried. I was really concerned that this was going to take a million tries like Colress, having just come off of that fiasco and how many tries that took. And then I did the battle, and I completed it in my first try. And I could not tell you why. I think I just got super lucky. I think that a lot of my minimizes just pulled me through this fight. You're going to see in the background here how much Muck carries. Muck was down into the red for basically the whole fight and still toughed it out and made it through. So here's to the real GOAT, Muck. I'm just speechless. I can't believe that we made this fight our first try. I was expecting this to be maybe the hardest fight of the whole run, even harder than the champion, but it ended up not being, and I'm just speechless. I have no clue why. Muck, you are amazing. Thank God you're on this team. This battle would not have been possible without Muck dodging like 80% of the attacks thrown its way. Minimize is a stupid move. I have no clue why it exists, but we get through it, and now it's time for the final rival battle of the game against Ben. This final rival battle is a bit anticlimactic and pretty disappointing. Ben was a pushover for most of the run except for that one battle I covered, and even that one only took me 2-3 tries to beat. Even though there's extra Bouffalant, he just doesn't do anything to us that really threatens us, and I'm really sorry, Ben. And I think he overheard all of this disrespect, because after I kick his ass, he ends up gifting us a Thunderbolt as our parting gift, which I bet he knows is entirely useless to us, so probably a little bit of a final FU after being a dick to him this whole run. But with that rival battle out of the way, it's now time for the grand finale of the game, the Pokemon League. And I'm going to say it again, here's some of the toughest battles that we've faced this entire run. I decided to take on the Elite Four members in reverse difficulty order, meaning I start with the most difficult ones and make my way down. The reason for this is that I don't want to get to the last Elite Four member, who I saved for last because they're most difficult, and find out that they're impossible to beat with my current team, and have to make my way back. And I'm very glad that I did this strategy, because I found out the first one I took on actually was impossible with my current team, which is why you saw in the background there me catching an Audino. I caught the Audino because Caitlin, the Psychic Elite Four member, has two Pokemon with very annoying abilities for us. Sigilyph has the ability Wonder Skin, meaning that all status moves are halved in accuracy. That one actually isn't all that big a deal, we just need to get a bit lucky and use twice as many of the status moves to get the effects onto them. But the real annoying one is Magic Guard on the Reuniclus. This means that we can't put Burn, Leech Seed, or any of our other effects onto the Reuniclus without changing that ability first, which is why I picked up the Audino. Audino has the ability to learn the move Simple Beam. This changes the target's ability to Simple, so our strategy is, for lack of a better word, simple. We use Simple Beam on the Reuniclus, change its ability to Simple, and then we're able to use as many status conditions as we would like. Needing to swap out Whimsicott for Audino wasn't the only thing that made this battle difficult. It's also the fact that we're facing 4 special attackers here, and special attackers we really struggle against. That's because we can't use Will-O-Wisp or Acid Armor to buff ourselves up. And the team also gets amazing coverage and is able to hit so many of our mons for super effective damage. Eventually, after a few attempts, this battle does end up going our way, and we're on to the next Elite Four member. Going into this Chantel fight, I'm going to explain why we swapped out Whimsicott and what Audino does for our team. We swapped out Whimsicott just because at this point in the game, having Prankster isn't as useful as it was before. So many of our mons, especially our mons that are also grass types, are so fast, so having Prankster isn't really all that helpful. The other things it sets up aren't all that accurate, so we want reliability, which is why we swapped it out instead of other things. And what makes Audino great is that it got Simple Beam to set over abilities that we do not like facing. It gets both Light Screen and Reflect for another screen setter, and it gets Toxic for more burst down damage like we're using for this run. So with that, I guess I'll go over what the rest of this battle entails. The reason that Chantel is the second most difficult Elite Four member is that, although slightly better than Caitlin, 3 of her 4 Pokemon are special attackers, which, as I just covered, we do match up horribly into. But we do have Audino to help us through this fight as well. The reason Audino is so useful here is because Audino, being a normal type, is completely immune to ghost type moves, meaning that we can switch in our ghost type Cofagrigus or Chandelure, bait out a Shadow Ball or other ghost move, and switch out into Audino, and Audino will take no damage, meaning that this fight is just a matter of waiting. With that battle out of the way, it's now time to take on Grimsley, the Dark type Elite Four member. The reason Grimsley is so much easier than the last two is because all of Grimsley's Pokemon are physical attackers, meaning that we can use Reflect, Acid Armor, and Will-O-Wisp to all buff up our defenses. And the only thing that really threatens us is critical hits, but as I've gone over before, critical hits do cripple us because they hit through basically everything except for burn. So this fight does take a few tries just because despite being able to Reflect, Acid Armor, Coil, Will-O-Wisp, if they do end up hitting a critical hit, they do have so much coverage that chances are they are hitting us for a super effective critical hit and taking us out. But all it takes is one lucky run where we don't encounter that many critical hits and the battle is ours. Because we just have so much bulk on our side, if our opponents don't get lucky, or I guess because of how many turns this takes, if we get a bit lucky, these battles just go by themselves, and you're going to see that the next battle goes by basically the same way. Last and least is Marshall, the fighting type Elite Four member. The reason that Marshall is so easy to beat is because Marshall has almost zero coverage on his team, and all of his attackers are physical attackers, meaning that once we set up, even if he does get critical hits, he's not dealing all that much damage to us, and we're just able to stall him out with our normal old strategies. It's so nice having this fight to just kind of recover and not really have to do all that much, because I am really running low on PP and have to conserve that for the champion fight, which ends up being unsurprisingly the most difficult fight of the run, even though I've said that probably about 20 times now. But with all those Elite Four members out of the way, let's get into the final fight of this run against Iris, the champion of Black 2. And what a final battle it is. This fight took me 29 tries to complete, but I persevered and decided not to go back and grind up and try and beat this final battle with overleveling. I wanted to beat it with the team I had. Part of that was also because I didn't want to have to go through the Elite Four again, but it was mostly that I did not want to just beat this by pure overleveling. So I'm going to walk you through each move that I take in this final battle on the successful attempt. Let's get into it. First up from Iris is her Hydreigon. This is easily her most threatening Pokemon for our team. Hydreigon is a special attacker, meaning that Will-O-Wisp and Iron Defense don't do anything to help us here. We start off with Toxic while Hydreigon starts repeatedly attacking us. We set up our minimizes so we can avoid attacks because that's our best bet of getting through this, and our Black Sludge heals us up incrementally throughout this battle. We have to really hope and pray that we don't get hit by these super powerful Dragon Pulses and Flamethrowers that this Hydreigon's throwing out, because if those do end up connecting, we take massive damage. At one point, Iris heals up with a full restore, but we preemptively set up another Toxic to make sure that Hydreigon keeps going down, and at one point we go into the red from a Dragon Pulse, but we end up hanging on, and Muk heals itself back up with its Black Sludge. We set up a few Iron Defenses here as well, just in case it switches in something other than Aggron, because Aggron has the ability to hit us for super effective, and with the Iron Defenses it's still pretty scary, but it ended up switching into the Aggron next, so after we take out this Hydreigon, we end up going into our Chandelure to handle the next Pokemon on our team, Aggron. We see that the Aggron's coming out, so we decided to switch out Muk. As I already said, we could be hit by super effective Earthquakes from this thing, but we end up switching into another Pokemon that can be hit by super effective Earthquakes from it, that being our Chandelure. This may seem counterintuitive, but this is to bait out an attack in a minute. We end up starting off with a Will-O-Wisp to cut its physical attack and damage because this thing is a pure physical attacker and ends up starting itself off with Atomize, meaning it doubles its speed. This doesn't really do anything to threaten us, and we switch out to Serperior. Once Serperior comes in, we completely wall this thing. We set up a Reflect and Leech Seed. In between the Reflect, Leech Seed, and our own leftovers, we're already healing up so much, but once we start setting up coils, there's really nothing that this Aggron can do. This Aggron only has physical attacks, none of which are super effective against our Serperior, and is most definitely the easiest of Iris's mons to beat. It's so easy, in fact, the Serperior ends up coming out the other side of it with full HP under its belt, taking us with a lot of momentum into the next mon. Unfortunately, the next mon that she's going to bring out is going to be her Druddigon, which means we have to switch out our Serperior to face, and we end up going back into our Chandelure. Next up is Druddigon. Druddigon is not normally a very threatening mon, but its kit it's running is. It has 2 physical and 2 special attacks, meaning that even once we've Will-O-Wisped it down with our Chandelure, it still has moves that are able to do a big damage. But even worse than that, it has the move Dragon Tail, meaning that it can actually switch out our Pokemon once we set up. Despite this, we still try and switch in our Muk to try and set up, but Muk ends up going down even through the Will-O-Wisp, bringing down the physical attack. Then we go into Cofagrigus, attempt to set up a few flashes, but after that I decided to switch into Lilligant. The reason I switched into Lilligant, despite it having Flamethrower that can deal big damage to us, is that we want to set up the Leech Seed, and all the other Pokemon that I'm saving for specific Pokemon that threaten us in a minute. We get very lucky here with Lilligant dodging a Flamethrower, and then once we switch back out to Chandelure expecting another Flamethrower, it actually goes for Focus Blast, which Chandelure is immune to. An even better situation than if it had gone for Flamethrower. Eventually, this very threatening Druddigon does go down, and it's on to the next Mon. Next up is Haxorus. I decided to leave my Chandelure in so I can get a Will-O-Wisp off. We end up going second, but still get the burn because of our ability Flame Body, which is so clutch here. Then we switch in Serperior, set up the Leech Seed, and get ready to take this thing down. The scary thing about this Haxorus is that it gets Dragon Dance, meaning that even though we've burned it, it still has the ability to set itself up. And because of the slow-paced nature of these battles, it actually gets a few Dragon Dances up, and we have to switch into our Cofagrigus to resist the X-Scissors that comes out to hit our Serperior. And even that still does big damage even though we resist it and it's burned. But it ends up going down without that much of a deal. Then it's into Lapras. This Lapras is the reason I was saving Audino for this fight and not switching it in for the other parts. The reason that this Lapras is so scary is that in addition to getting Surf, it also gets Ice Beam, meaning that it can hit our grass types for super effective damage. We set up Toxic with Audino, switch into Petulia expecting a Surf, but it actually goes for Ice Beam and takes us down, which is very unfortunate. We go back into Audino, set up our Light Screen so we can start resisting, and hope that this Toxic takes it down before it can deal any more damage to some of our other Mons. Before we're able to get down though, we actually end up getting off a Light Screen and a Reflect, which sets us up perfectly for our final Pokemon, her Archeops. And this Archeops is the final test before we're able to beat this game. Now, the nice thing about Archeops is that once it gets down to half HP, its ability kicks in, making it so that it only does half as much damage otherwise. Nope, it just hits with Acrobatics and stole our Mummy, meaning that even at half HP, it's still going to be dealing the same amount of damage. Well, that's a bit scary, so we decided to start going for Destiny Bonds with Cofagrigus, and luckily, right on our very last Destiny Bond, before we'd run out of PP, we end up taking the Archeops down with us, leaving our Serperior as our last Mon standing as we take down Iris, meaning that we had a whole other Pokemon at full HP that probably could have taken out another Pokemon, because at this point, Serperior, I think, is actually our best Mon. A very fitting way to end the run with your starter being your strongest Mon. But with that, we've beaten the champion and officially beaten the main story of Pokemon Black 2 without ever once using an actual attack. And I couldn't have done it without all of these Mons. Muck, the Minimize and Luck God. Lilligant, the status condition and itself healer. The Serperior, all around goat. The Audino, the clutch up last minute entry. Chandelure, the all around Will-O-Wisper. And Cofagrigus, the Mon that got the final blow. All of them were critical to getting us through this run. And before I close out this video, there's just a few other things I feel like I need to address. First, I want to thank you all for coming along this journey with me. This is easily the most fun I've ever had going through a Pokemon game, and at the same time, the hardest. It may not seem like it because you only really saw the winning attempts on a lot of the fights, but basically every single fight in this run gave me challenge in some way or other, even the ones that I said were very easy. So if you're really looking for a challenge and you don't want to try the traditional Nuzlocke, and you have a lot, and I mean a lot of time on your hands, I'd actually suggest going through a run like this, because I had a blast. It was a big challenge, but it did take a pretty long time, so only attempt one if you have the time to do it. But the nice thing is that the main challenge doesn't actually come from knowing the games themselves. You don't need to have this deep knowledge of it or anything like that. So I would just say if you're looking for a fun way to play Pokemon, maybe give this a shot. The next thing I feel like I need to say is that yes, at certain points in this video it did bounce around like crazy, and there was definitely parts that I wanted to include that I couldn't find the footage for, and parts that were included that maybe didn't need to be to like pad out the video, and it kind of bounced around and wasn't the best put together. And the reason for that is that I lost a lot of the footage needed for this run, and that's because this footage I'm using is over 2 years old. So I recorded this over 2 years ago, have attempted to edit it into a video. I think this is my 4th attempt now to edit it down, and it's only just now getting complete. I'm so glad I finally got this down. I definitely think it was worth it. All the attempts before probably had other footage that ended up not getting lost to time or anything like that. But if there was parts that you feel like needed improvement or were missing, it's probably because I was wanting to include them, but I couldn't find the old footage, or the old footage got corrupted or something like that. So if you have any advice for me on how to improve videos like this, because I definitely want to keep making challenge run videos, not just Pokemon, but a few other ones, just please let me know and I'll take it into consideration. But also keep in mind that if some of your suggestions is about including this part or including this part, that probably is something that I do know and I just lost the footage. But you know what, include it anyways, because I love hearing all the feedback and I just want to know about the way I can make these videos better for all of you who watch them. And with that, I just want to say once again, thank you for going on this video with me. Despite it taking so long to make, I do think it was worth it, and I'm so excited for when this thing finally hits YouTube. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.